Well, why don't we get started? We're very blessed to have today Mary Ann Cohen, who is with us, obviously a town supervisor, is on post. It's early for our deliberations today. And Mary Ann, we'd love to hear what's going on in Camillus and your perspectives on what we're trying to do.
All right, I have very small notes here because I know you're all very, very busy. I'd like to welcome you. I was asked to discuss some of the issues we're dealing with here in Camillus and my thoughts of consensus going forward. So I have notes because if I don't, I get on a tangent. I'd like to begin by thanking each and every one of you for the time and your commitment to this project. Very necessary project. We do need to look at where we're going in the future. For us here in Camillus, each year becomes more difficult putting together our town budget. Trying to keep a budget together without reducing or eliminating services has become a bit of a nightmare. Trying to keep the taxes stable without increasing is virtually impossible. Over the past several years in the town, we've made several changes to try to keep our budget stable. And notice I didn't say reduce because it's impossible today. In 2008, we placed a hiring freeze for all full-time employees. We changed our brush pickup from every week to every other, which doesn't sound like a big deal. It saved us a lot of money, also caused us a lot of agita for those of you that understand that, because it was a change and people were used to one service, and now we've changed that service and reduced it a bit. When our tax receiver passed away, we eliminated the position and combined it with our tax receiver, or with our town clerk. We share our dog control officer with the town of Van Buren. We have a cap with the town of Elbridge where we share our assessor. With an aging infrastructure system that would have cost us millions to repair, 2 years ago we decided to lease our Camillus Consolidated Water District to Aqua. We recently approved an agreement with the town of Geddes Police, where we now share services such as training, grant writing, and investigations. Even with these improvements, balancing that budget without raising taxes is a challenge. We are all dealing with government mandates, a 2% tax cap, rising costs of employee benefits, just to mention a few, and fewer ways to get revenue. We're doing the best we can. Every community believes that we are the best we can be, but we also know we have to change the way we do business. Albert Einstein once said, "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." As you move forward with this project, I ask that you please remember a few things. One, the passion of each community to stay a community. That one size does not always fit all. That bigger is not better, but we all realize we can do better. It's important that we all work together on this to try to keep our passions to a neutral level. And I look forward to the comments of the public. I understand we're going to present this to the public. I'd like to know what the public is looking at for their governments in the future. So that I welcome you here. I'm glad you're here. If there's anything we can get for you today, please let us know. And I welcome any questions.
Mary Ann, I think your remarks are right dead on. So, great job.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Mary Ann, before you leave, sorry, will you just take a couple minutes and talk about two things for the commission? The first is your recent mutual agreement, whatever you want to call it, between the town of Geddes Police and the Camillus Police. And the second is the 4 or 5 year ago discussion vote failed on the village of Camillus to be merged into the town of Camillus.
I think I'll start there. If that's
Okay, sure, yeah, please.
Kathy's right. It went for public referendum, and at that time, the county was involved. There was money from the state to consolidate villages with towns. This works for some. I really felt it would work for us. Not every village is the village of Camillus. We supply most of the services to the village of Camillus. The only thing they have is a highway department and a part-time code enforcement officer. So the town felt, although we stay out of it, that it made sense for this to take place. Unfortunately, it did not. The big reason why was because of trash and trash service. We won't go into somebody's house and take their trash from the garage and bring it to the curb. These are all services that were important and are important to the village, but we just couldn't supply that service. It was too costly, too much of a liability, and we said no. With that, after several meetings with, what's the gentleman's name that used to work
Yeah.
for Joni?
Travis.
Travis. He worked, he was the liaison, and it went to a vote, very small vote, but it was defeated.
And do you remember, Mary Ann, percentage of turnout of residents?
Very small.
It was like,
I think it was 1,000, a little over 1,000 people.
right, out of,
Oh, a couple thousand.
right, so it
But
was.
most of them are renters.
Right,
So I think it needs to be addressed again. I think it could be successful with more communication, with more facts. I think it should be relooked at, because we'll do whatever the village wants, and the village will always be the village. I think that's part of what they didn't realize. There was no loss of identity. It was just a change in services and a cheaper tax bill. For us, but that won't work for everybody.
Was it a dual referendum? Was it a referendum in the town and in the village? Or
No, just the village,
just
and
the
no
village?
town residents could vote on it.
Could you comment on the mandates, the government mandates you referred to, and what are the most challenging mandates?
That 2% cap is a bit much. The MS4 that we have to deal with regard to drainage, we have a new sewer law that's come at us, and if we didn't sign it, we don't get grant money. So, to me, that's blackmail. I'm sure the county would call it something else. These are just a small example of some of the mandates we get. I just finished, I was telling the guys here, a webinar for our health insurance. And if we don't do it just so, we're going to have to pay a penalty for each and every employee we have. So it's brand new, we're still piecing through that, and I spent a half hour on that just a little bit ago, and we're all going to have to deal with that, because we all have to offer health insurance. Just one more.
Thanks.
And the other question was, would get us.
right.
Yeah.
These are baby steps for the town of Camillus and the town of Geddes. Chris Ryan from the county legislative branch approached me. Would I be interested in this study? There was money available. I spoke with Manny, who is the supervisor in Geddes. We met with a gentleman from Bob Antonacci's office, comptroller, and we sat, we worked it out, looked at what we could or couldn't do. Neither of us wanted to abolish our police department. We are both in negotiations with the unions at this time. So we met with the police chiefs. We said, what can we do, what can't we do? And this went on for, I wanna say, for 9 months. We found certain areas that would work for both departments. With that, the chiefs took it to the rank and file. They agreed this would work. So we recently, 2 weeks ago, put forth an agreement, and both towns have approved it. They're baby steps, but I think going forward, each department will learn how the other works. They'll learn who we are, and I think going forward, it's just a win-win for everybody. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Do you see any other services that you might be considering, shared services with others nearby?
Well, you know, we do it now, but we do it pretty informally. If a town needs one of our trucks, we give them one of our trucks. When the ice storm was in Fulton and they lost their highway garage, we sent trucks to them. There was no formal agreement like this, like the state would like to see, where you've got now attorneys involved and everything else. It's very informal. It works. It works. It's worked for a long time. So we do it now. As far as sharing the assessor, sharing our dog control, those are ones that have been cost effective for us. I'm sure going forward there's gonna have to be others. Because even doing what we've done, our taxes stayed stable, but we had a 0.6% increase. Or just an increase. Maybe more police down the road. We'll see. Other questions?
We thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you, thank all of you. We love our jobs, so I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that book for me or is that for somebody?
That you can take that.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Oh, and the bathrooms are right to the side here, if anybody needs them, there's 2 escape routes if you need to. Get out, okay?
Thanks, Mary Ann.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too.
The next item on the agenda is the baseline release update. And I'll just start, but I'd like to have Dr. Joe Stemko chime in on this, and also Rob Simpson. It occurred last Friday. There was this intense anticipation, I think, of how it would go. I think it went very well. There was a press conference in the morning. I think that the media turnout wasn't what we wanted it to be, because the lieutenant governor was in town, happened to be in town on Friday, that drew some of the press away. We had what I thought was a very constructive meeting with the editorial team. I thought they asked good questions. They seemed very interested, and I get a sense that they viewed that they could be a partner with us going forward, both in the education of the public and getting the appropriate information out, and that kind of thing. So, Joe, first, your thoughts on how that went?
I thought both meetings, both presentations went extremely well. I completely agree with you, Neil. The one thing I'd add about the meeting with the Ed Board was, they're really interested in leveraging the data that we pull together, all the expenditure and revenue data and service data, to create something that is interactive, that would be housed on their site, but certainly something that we could link to from ours. So, that meeting last Friday was an opportunity for us to open that dialogue, and their data team is going to connect with ours, and we'll make that happen. I don't have a good sense yet of what the timeline is on that, but certainly as the baseline, the public forums, the public meetings roll forward over the next month or so, that's going to be another vehicle for us to engage the public. So that's a great opportunity.
Excellent. Rod, your thoughts?
I think the questions that the editorial board were asking were the absolute right questions for them to be probing. I think if there's one thing I've sensed from them that I think we try to impress upon them, it's they're looking for what the next step is in the next phase, right? What are the recommendations? What are the best practices? What are the solutions? And I think Neil and Joe in particular did a great job of reminding them that this is in fact an open and deliberative and transparent process. There's no answer in a drawer, and those are things that we're going to have to come to together. So, I think we can count on them to provide good coverage of this going forward.
Excellent. Murph, any perspectives?
No, I covered it.
Was there any skepticism? Did you sense any skepticism?
I didn't
Sure.
sense any deep skepticism, but I think there was, concerns as to how the process would go.
It's the post standard, so there's definitely
Well, yeah, that's
skepticism. But I would agree with Neil. It wasn't negative skepticism so much. It was just is this going to amount to anything? Will it be real? Will it make a difference? How are we going to make sure that everyone is involved? And so they were good. They were good, legitimate questions, but they weren't negative in any way, shape, or form.
Mel may have a perspective. She was on.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah.
No, you know what, I think very similar to what has been echoed. I think that the biggest piece for us is just to continue to push that it is a transparent process. And there is a lot of data out here that we want the public to really sift through and own it and make their thoughts known based upon the data that's in front of them. And so I think that was one of the other main messages we tried to communicate. This is a public document, and we want you to grab hold of it and have your thoughts, communicate your thoughts. And Murph is enjoying this part because I did make that a very pointed part of our discussion. Yeah, I thought it was good, both the morning and afternoon.
Excellent. Questions? Why don't you get on then? Foundation update. I think we've got Rob has some good news to share with everyone.
Thanks to a lot of hard work, not only by Neil, but Kathy and others. We've had some very good success with the local foundations. I think, happy to report, the Allen Foundation has agreed to commit, between the Allen Foundation and Welsh Allen, collectively committing $50,000 to support the public engagement process. We've also received a $5,000 commitment from the Snow Foundation. Both of those checks have already arrived. We are expecting a decision in very short order from the Gifford Foundation on 20 or 25. Do you have news you want to share?
$25,000.
Okay, $25,000 approved from Gifford. We are expecting an answer any day now from Reisman, which we expect will be somewhere in the order of 25 to 50 also. And am I leaving anyone out?
We're meeting with Community February, mid-February.
That's right. So we're meeting with the Community Foundation, the last of the 5, in the middle of February to present to their program committee, I believe, or is it the full board?
Both.
The program committee and the full
Program/board.
board, and the request to them is for 50. So we will, by the time this process is done, I think come very close to the $170,000 goal that Melanie and the Public Engagement Committee set out for us. And, frankly, that's for our local foundation community, a very significant series of investments, and all working together, I think, is a really good sign. So a good vote of confidence in the work that's being done.
Steve, I want to thank you. Mayor
Yes.
O'Connell
Yeah,
is
she's terrific.
a yeoman's job in bringing together the foundations and encouraging their participation. And the Allen Foundation taking the lead, stepping up to the plate first. I think that was
I'll convey appreciation. Yeah, thanks.
very strong. Thank you. Questions? I think we're making good progress there. Darlene, you still on the phone?
I am still on the phone.
Thank you. Could you give an update for Public Safety Committee?
Yes, I'm glad we do that. The subcommittee, hello, are you there?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are.
That's better.
Okay, this is better. The subcommittee on fire, EMS, and ambulance services continues to meet with experts from Onondaga County Emergency Management, 911, fire, EMS, and ambulance services in order to gain a better understanding of how these services are delivered and at what cost and quality levels. We're currently engaged in a very significant effort to extract data from multiple sources. And I want to say thank you to Ann Rooney and Andrew Maxwell for providing information and support from several of your people from 911, the Office of Emergency Management, and the Syracuse-Onondaga County Planning Agency. I mean, your efforts and your team has just been invaluable, so we really appreciate their time. Now, we're taking data from each of these sources, data such as population densities and distribution, the numbers and types and location of emergency calls, response times to the calls, locations of fire, EMS, and ambulance facilities, and an inventory of apparatus within these facilities. Our plan is to overlay this data on maps to evaluate the current system's capacity and cost in responding to service emergency needs. And then the next step will be to create alternative service delivery models that could serve the public better, faster, and maybe more cost effectively. Now, the Public Safety Subcommittee on Police and Corrections has not yet begun to meet. However, data collection is underway for those because as we gather data on fire and EMS, we're also gathering similar data from the same sources on police, so that when this subcommittee begins to meet, we can move more quickly through this service delivery system evaluation and redesign process. I'd say our biggest challenge is the consistency and accuracy of data. Not because the systems aren't good, they are, but because there are multiple fire departments, for instance, recording this information information, it's inconsistent the way it's reported. And so we've really struggled with response times. We had to take that out of the baseline report because we knew it wasn't accurate. And so we're going to work on making it more accurate, I guess. But accuracy and consistency of data is a huge challenge. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, questions for Darlene? Darlene, thank you very much. Thank you for doing what you're doing, okay? Say hi to John.
Oh, I will.
Take care.
Okay.
We wanted to cover Darlene first because we weren't sure of the connectivity and that kind of thing, so. Well, let's go back, Melanie, the Public Engagement Committee.
Sure, thanks, Neil. In addition to our rollout last week from the media briefing perspective, there are several other elements that we're working on now. First of which is the large rollout of the baseline report, our, if you will, community-wide first kickoff effort. We are looking at this point, probably the last week in February 24th. I do hesitate to give you that date, but that's the one that we are trying to nail down on. We were actually trying February 10th, but that's the week of the car show. So, in terms of facilities and being hosting it, we believe as a team that the most appropriate place for the kickoff meeting would be somewhere in downtown. It's a very neutral site in all four quadrants of not only the city but all elements of the county could easily access downtown. Following our the baseline rollout at our large meeting, and on that day, on the 24th, we want to schedule two meetings. One, a lunch hour, and then the second, immediately and after work, early evening hour, and there we will try to entice the public to come in with the offer of something, not only information but food and childcare. Following that, we will break out, and during that meeting, we will also ask for participation at other local meetings. So whether or not it's the living room, and you have neighbors, or whether it's a community center and you want to host different meetings. That effort will begin in earnest following the February baseline rollout. Subsequently, we will as well look for other opportunities to engage with other stakeholders. So if we are looking at municipal officials or any other elected official, whether it's county ledge, whether it's common council, to even do joint meetings with them in their constituent areas, our objective is to get out. And then the third leg of this is really trying to figure out gathering places where people gather. Come April, gathering starts in big public places. So how do we begin to maximize groups? And so we are thinking about ways in which we do that. If we do we call it a man or woman on the street kind of interview, are there three top things we can at least solicit the public with to garner some engagement? Again, all of that is certainly in discussions. We are really evaluating all mechanisms of communication. So whether it's the social media channels, whether it's the I don't want to call it the man and woman on the street interviews, or whether it's these more formalized meetings, we will exercise every effort to engage the public and engage them where they are, not necessarily where we think they should be. So more to come from the team. Mark, I don't know if I left anything out, and I know you sat in on one. Murph, anything that I forgot to
I don't think so, no.
Deb, you have to get in there?
No, just one or two quick things to add as follow-up. Both News Channel 9 and CNY Central have expressed an interest in really delving into the work of Concensus in some of their longer form interviews. They've also, CNY Central has also expressed an interest in helping to promote any community meetings or events that we do. So we have those pledges in hand from both of those outlets.
And the media folks that did show up to the press piece, it was great because there were some new faces around the table, new levels of engagement being drawn in some of the non-traditional media channels. So excited about at least opening up dialogue in that space as well. So that's it, that's my report.
Thank you. Just put on the table, one of the sensitivities of the Gifford Foundation is to make sure that there's strong outreach to those that are classically underserved.
Yeah, got that.
And, so we just have to be sensitive to that to make sure that we really work hard at that.
And the staff is willing, the Gifford staff is willing to work with you too.
I actually saw Sheena on, I think it was because Sheena Solomon is the person who actually does a lot of the engagement, in particular on the south side in particular. And I told her, I said, we're coming after you. We need you to be engaged. And she said, absolutely and totally. And just so you know, we as well are thinking about a very directed strategy and how we fully engage, populations that have been traditionally underrepresented or underserved. So
Excellent.
we got that.
You're ahead of the game, as usual. Thank you. Why don't we hit on to infrastructure, Bill?
Yeah.
You had hosted a lively meeting.
Yes, we did. We've actually had two meetings since our last full meeting. On December 15th, we actually held a joint meeting with Syracuse 2020's task force, which is also looking at infrastructure. And there's some nice resources there and people that are involved already in looking at infrastructure. Our meeting on December 15th really focused on highways and bridges and those kinds of resources, highway departments. In Onondaga County, we have 36 separate highway departments with a range of servicing roads ranging from almost 800 miles down to less than 2 miles, which seems pretty amazing. Our guests at that meeting were Jim D'Agostino from the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council, Brian Donnelly from who heads the Onondaga County DPW, Pete O'Connor from the city of Syracuse, and Jim Croft from Manlius. And I just wanted to read you, we got into, as usual, when you get into these meetings, there's a ton of detail, and there's a ton of, we can't do this, and we need to do that, and there's no money for this. And we did a lot of detail and a lot of, talked a lot about the relationships especially between planning and getting the work done, which there's a very serious issue with complexity and who can handle the complexity involved in accessing federal funds. We talked a lot about that. But let me just read you the takeaways from this. And there's 7 of them that are fast. Many towns and villages can't access federal funds as the process is too onerous and their roads often aren't eligible for funding. 2, most sharing between towns and villages happens at an ad hoc basis. Standard templates for intermunicipal agreements would be helpful. There isn't a current inventory of skills and equipment available at each DPW throughout the county. In other words, we just don't know what's next door to us. Insurance liability concerns are a big barrier to the sharing of equipment and staff between municipalities. A mutual aid system could be examined here. Staff and budgets have been reduced in past years, but processes and due diligence hasn't changed. Look into the tax cap and its ability to impact rebates for municipal cooperation. And out of those 7 items, 6 of those 7 items are directly related to the simple fact that there's too many entities, and it's about that simple. We have a friend in the equipment business, and I was talking this over with him, and he said that in the state of New York, there are 2,000 separate purchasing agencies for road equipment. He said it's crazy, everybody knows it's crazy, and nobody's doing anything about it. And that was what he said. I think there's a lot of work. There's certainly, I think in terms of potential and in terms of, you know, our goals and our mandate, there's certainly a lot of work to be done here. On the other hand, you know, the process and how you get there is going to be very, very difficult. 93% of the highway superintendents in New York State are elected officials. So we have all kinds of process issues involved here. But I think if there was one thing that really hit me was Jim D'Agostino from the Metropolitan Transportation Council, just talking about the process involved in accessing federal funding for roads, and look at what we're going through with 81 and these issues. This stuff is tough sledding. And speaking of sledding, you know, because some of the towns, $9,000 a year just for snow plowing for our roads here in Onondaga County. So there's a lot of work to be done here. There's a lot of entities. There's a lot of, you know, interplay between different levels of government. And there's a lot of local control, and there's a lot of, you know, our community kind of issues here. So we had an excellent meeting, and there's just no question about it. There's a ton of work to be done here, and a lot of potential. Our second meeting, which we just held just a couple days ago, focused on water and sewer, and we had two guests at that meeting. One was Tom Rhodes from Onondaga County Water Environment Protection, and Deborah Summers, who's the Commissioner of Water for the City of Syracuse. And it's almost unbelievable how different the two meetings were, in the sense that, you know, here at the first meeting was all about, you know, the number of just the wide range of different organizations that are involved in this thing, whereas on water and sewer the numbers are way less, and the organizations are way bigger. Now, sure, you get into a lot of things like who owns what sewer and those kind of issues, and then there's a lot more entities involved. But the huge issue with water and sewer, there's actually a couple of things. And Tom Rhodes did an excellent presentation. That number one is we need to remember that water resources are seen as one of our great strengths here in upstate New York. It's something that we have that a lot of other communities don't have. And related to the fact that the resources are so good is that our costs are actually lower. Unlike, you know, some of the other things that we're doing, our water costs and our sewer costs are significantly lower than the national average. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of range within New York State, but in terms of costs, we're really not in very bad shape. Where we are in really difficult shape is in terms of capital requirements, capital planning, and long-term issues, especially related to the city of Syracuse. And Deborah Summers talked a lot about how, you know, there's all kinds of water lines in the city. They're 120 years old, and how are we going to replace all that? There's every time we dig a hole, there's a leak, and you know, they get down to the pipe, and we find out that the dirt's really holding the pipe together. So the capital needs related to water and sewer are really a huge issue, and again, I think maybe a little bit beyond our scope, but certainly within. In terms of the kind of things we've been talking about, shared services working together, there's been pretty good cooperation. There are some legal issues and related to like rural municipal sewage treatment plants, and you know, should the county run that or should they be run by the local organization? There's discussions ongoing, but I think we made some real progress in terms of just trying to get our hands around, you know, what's going on. Again, I think the baseline report is excellent. It looks like there's some low-hanging fruit in the highway side. It really does. I'm not so sure that that's true on the sewer and water side. And if anything, I came away from the water and sewer meeting, you know, thinking that, you know, that we're going to need some outside help with respect to some of these really big issues related to capital investment and replacing and improving our water system. So I think just in terms of our committee and in terms of our, we have some excellent people on the committee. I think we have a great group. We have a lot of expertise. I guess we get a chance to do one more kind of information seeking meeting, and then the expectation is we're gonna get into looking at possibilities and recommendations. But I think we're off to a real good start. Any questions?
You said 2,000 purchasing agents in New York?
In New York, 2,000 separate entities. That's what I was told by,
I think there's 2 in Onondaga County, just as a point of reference. There's none in the villages. We use the county, because we all signed on. And I don't know what the towns use, but, and then the villages, yeah, you said 93% are elected. I think the 7% is the villages that are appointed. Which has been, I think, something that the towns have tried to look at.
Ours is, there's only 2 towns in there.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're right, the sewer and the water, if you look at our budgets and when we have a problem, it's the most expensive problem that we have to deal with because it's aging and it's, one street we did, one new sewer line, one block, it was $400,000, but it was 23 feet down.
That's part of the problem.
It is just so, it's so expensive.
You can't ever get ahead.
But there's new technologies, the county, thank God, has a new slip binding thing, so we're doing that, but it's $100,000 for less than maybe 200 feet. So, but it lasts 70 years. Oh yeah, it's a German technology that they brought over, and it's great, it's just so expensive. But we're working with, but those 2 things, while you said they are the cheapest, they're the most expensive to try to repair and try to fix and try to stay ahead of, right?
It was telling to me, because I had the pleasure of being at both of the meetings, I think 392 water main breaks last year, and the average cost to repair was
$250,000.
Yeah, that seemed a little higher.
It's in the city, huh?
City only.
Yeah.
Some of those are. And the thought that, for example, in the replacement of the water mains, for example, in the city, upon reworking Fayette, so much hand digging had to be done as opposed to using mechanical equipment. Again, the labor costs for that kind of thing is just outrageous. And they definitely, I think, we need some help, I think that was a strong thing.
Right, but just one other point. Some economic development issues related to, especially to water and sewer came up. DEC has actually issued planning moratoriums in certain areas of the state related to sewer and water availability. Deborah Summers was talking about someone proposing a building where they had enough water, but they didn't have enough flow. Didn't have enough flow for fire protection for the building. So there really are, there really is some crossover here into economic development related to water and sewer. And again, I think the interesting part is, again, our costs are lower. Our costs are lower than national average. We know that we have, between Skinny Atlas Lake and Lake Ontario, we just have outstanding water supplies, and yet when the rubber hits the road in terms of developing a particular area and providing these utilities to them, there's big issues.
Though, were there also policy or questions that came up around standards, because when I'm thinking of, burying pipe 23, aren't
Yeah,
there standards that say you don't
there's
have to
stuff
go
coming
in?
down the road all the time from EPA. Tom Rhodes
Yeah.
talked about addressing, standards and federal mandates.
Deeper you go, the more expensive it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, some of us are under federal consent through Meadowbrook too, which I don't know if Tom
Right, he
mentioned to you.
talked about Meadowbrook.
So the whole town of Manlius, the whole,
Yeah, he
a few
mentioned
others.
Meadowbrook limestone in that
So
particular.
for every gallon, so if, say,
You have to, with the flow
yeah,
offset.
so say Stickley wanted to expand and put on 100,000 square feet, and they were gonna add so many gallons to the system. For every gallon they add, we have to find an offset.
Yeah.
And then Stickley would have to pay a per gallon price for that offset to be able to do the, upgrades, because the system's taxed. So,
Part of
it's,
it is I&M.
yeah,
They're old systems, they're leaking,
Yeah.
so we get a lot of groundwater and stormwater runoff. It takes some of that capacity away.
but it's all good. I mean, it's all good things that
Oh,
they're
yeah.
trying to do, it's just getting ahead of it, and it's expensive. It's not, the two major pieces of infrastructure.
But with water being one of our most important assets, not to be putting money into the infrastructure, investing in that area, I think is a mistake. As Bill said, it's directly tied to economic development.
Oh my God, yeah, think about it.
Excellent. Bill, good report. Any other questions, Bill? Let's move on to municipal operations meeting.
We met on December 17th, and we had a very good meeting. We began by trying to get a handle on how the municipalities work. So we began by inviting 3 clerks, a town clerk and village clerks, and we first realized right away that the clerks are the keepers of all the records, and they have, although their job is defined by New York State, but it does vary by village and town. The people who are, it's very interesting, Lisa Goodwin, who is the town of Onondaga, who was elected, when asked whom do you report to, and she said, the citizens who elected me. Others, of course, who are appointed feel that they report to the mayor and the board, and they work with them. And their responsibilities vary dramatically, from keeping records, to issuing licenses, to sometimes going beyond that, making sure that the day-to-day operations of town government are kept intact. One thing that actually struck us all as we were talking about that is how the records are kept, the different records. They're still kept the old-fashioned way. And we talked a fair amount about role of technology in that. There's every village, there's every town needs to have their individual records, whether it is marriage license, driving license, violations, tax assessment, any of that. And there was a fair amount of discussion actually on, would that cut into the cost? Does it make it more inconvenient, or is it more accessible? And I think I don't think there was in the end consensus among the clerks themselves, although the committee members may have felt differently about that. But the job of the clerk is actually very extensive, and their salaries vary depending on the size of the town they are in or the village. But they gave us a sense. One person came with a book that New York State talks about what their responsibilities are, and it really is the running of the business. Some of them work on the budget with the mayor. Some of them make sure that all the bills are paid. They are the record keepers. They are the chiefs of staff in many instances. And I think all in all, they feel, I got the sense that the 3 who were there, while they felt very good about their positions, they felt overwhelmed with the amount of work they are all entrusted with on a day-to-day basis. Now, we did not, our next meeting is going to get into the financial operations of the municipalities, and that will tie in much more into our baseline study in terms of do we need to have many of those services at different levels they are, at what cost does that calculate to us? But I'm going to ask Mark and Kathy if any comments, any additional things came out of that meeting that you took.
No, I think you captured it pretty well. I mean, the clerk is the life, whoever the clerk is, they're the person that's there probably just as much, if not more, than anybody else. And I certainly rely on our clerk for just about everything that I can. And they do much more than the clerk duties. My clerk does purchasing and everything else. So it's really a catch-all job that's very important. And I think one thing we also talked about, if you don't have the right person, it can really screw everything up.
Anne, any other comments? You were at this meeting.
The only other thing that it's just really interesting is the size of the community dictated really the size of the clerk's office and what their duties were. Was it the village of Fayetteville or Manlius? Where was Lisa?
Manoa.
Yeah.
Oh, Manoa? Yeah, she you know, I feel like if she didn't show up for work, the village was going by the
Yes.
wayside.
Definitely. And that's what I meant by some of them really felt overwhelmed by the number of tasks they have to handle on a daily
Mhm.
basis.
But I thought, Mark, you would have it well under control if the clerk didn't show up.
No question.
I don't know if you remember what Dick Donovan said when we had our meeting in Miller. So I couldn't live without this person.
Mhm.
Yes.
I couldn't function.
And that's the sense we got actually after listening to the clerks and what they do. Any other people?
No, I agree. I think we covered it.
Okay, we have our next meeting scheduled, and as I said, I think next meeting would be probably very interesting because it will be the financial operations, and it's what we've all been talking about, who delivers what and at what cost, and is there an opportunity for some of these costs to be, some of the services to be shared at a lower cost? And the answer is we don't know yet. I think this is a learning process, and we begin each meeting by telling everybody that we think we have a great community and we have a lot of things that work right. But as everything else in life, there are so many changes and we need to adapt to some of these by being flexible and re-examining how we do things. Because what might have been relevant 5 years ago may not necessarily be relevant today. And so we go from here, and our next meeting is January 27th at 1 o'clock.
Excellent. Other questions of the meeting?
No, I guess my only comment would be, from a business, you're all business owners. You pick your CFO or your controller, right? Think about that not happening. You pick the right person, you put the right person on the bus because you want to make sure that everything's done. Mark, the county, towns don't have that ability. Villages do. And they are, I mean, I'm fortunate. If one person does a $5.6 million budget, pays the bills, payroll, accounts receivable, everything. I'm fortunate that I know a lot about it, and if she didn't show up, I would be in trouble, but we'd get through. But I think it works, and it works very well. So when we're thinking about shuffling the deck and looking at it, in business, you guys pick the right people to run your business, and people that you know will do a good job and be forward thinkers. I think that's a good recipe, and I think that's something that your committee should look at.
We did, actually, there was discussion about the merits of being appointed versus being elected, and how that function. And it is, there's no doubt, it's true, whether it's the President of the United States or the CEO of a company, people bring their team in. And there is a flip side to that, which was also discussed as part of the discussion, which is, do you have enough of a check and balance system if people bring their own people? And so I think it is we need to remain very open-minded about that and consider all options. But that was definitely one of the thoughts in terms of being appointed opposed to being elected.
And one of the new mandates, Steve, just so you know, there's another if we get a grant now, we have to do a full audit. We have to show them our latest full audit. We normally do like a simple audit, then a full audit.
You know, I don't know how the grant's deployed.
No, of your whole village. So before, it used to be
Before
about
everybody-
$3,000 a year. You'd get everything, making sure everything was where it should, checks and balances. Now it's, the last one I think I had was $15,000. State mandated.
To do the audit.
You have to, if
And
you
that's
want
a-
the grant,
that's a
you have to.
minimum 15.
15, you have to do that,
And that goes with the bonding as well.
yes. So, but the grants, it's a nice, they're nice, but
As long
that's
as
another
they're-
mandate.
as long as they're over
It never used to be a
50,000.
mandate, now it's, doesn't matter what it is. But that's a new mandate. So,
And there is no help with those audits. I mean, there is no.
no, we
Auditor.
most of us hire out professional firms.
Amini, thank you. Larry, you've got one of the more interesting committees in some respects. How does this all boil down to economic development?
Well, I would say that our committee, which really is economic development, land use and planning and permitting, is still very much in the data collection phase. We're looking at the structures, the costs, the jurisdictions, the boards that are involved in the decisions, the decision-making process of local government in each of those areas. Starting with economic development, Rob Simpson is on our committee, and he's been very helpful in putting together and collecting information on local government's involvement in economic development, and especially collecting information on non-governmental organizations that are involved in that space. In fact, at our next meeting, Rob is going to give us some of his background on the impact the present local government structures have on economic development in the overall region. We're also hoping to have Bruce Katz from the Brookings Institution. Bruce is the founding director of the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program and has had a lot of interaction with this region over the last 10 years. And he's, the date of our next meeting will be scheduled, I think, around Bruce's availability. That's something that Rob is in the process of scheduling. In terms of land use and planning, our committee member, Andrew Maxwell, who apparently has been busy collecting information for a lot of committees, is putting together information on the landscape of land use and planning within Onondaga County. He's already started to provide us an education on the regional land use plan, but there are, as you are all well aware, there are many planning boards throughout the county, and we're going to be looking at the costs, the number of boards, the overlapping jurisdictions of all of those organizations, and trying to at least collect a comprehensive amount of data on that. We had scheduled to meet with Town of Clay Supervisor Damian Latowski at our last meeting. Unfortunately, I think he was affected with the flu, and he wasn't able to come, so we're rescheduling that. We're also asking Mike Lazar, who's the chair of the DeWitt Planning Board, to attend a meeting. So that'll probably be 2 meetings from now. We're also collecting information on local government offices, governing statutes, rules, regulations involved in permitting, and the right to build processes in local government. It's something that we all hear from developers in the area. We've invited Jim Brewer from Huber Brewer, who does a lot of commercial construction in the area, to attend a meeting. And he's agreed to do that, and we're probably going to invite 1 or 2 others, hopefully somebody in the housing arena, to come and talk to us about that. Sort of in the big picture, we've started to educate ourselves on how local government structures, tax structures, regional planning, and local planning and permitting process have an impact on regional economic development. And we're collecting reading materials from David Rusk's book. David Rusk was the mayor of the city of Albuquerque, I believe. Many years ago, he wrote a book called Cities Without Suburbs. After the 2010 census, he updated that book, and that book is being provided to committee members. There's a large focus on New York State in that book, which is why it's helpful. There's also a gentleman named Jerry Paytak, who's the former director of the Carnegie Mellon Center for Economic Development in Pittsburgh, who's written a lot on the correlation between multiple local governments and the impact on economic development. We're also trying to add 1 or 2 more people to our committee, and ask has been named Eric Persons. Eric is the Vice President of Intergovernmental Relations at SU, and he has a particular interest in this area, and we're hoping that he'll join us. So stay tuned, and that's where we are at this point in time. Lori or Murph, anything that... We're hoping that Rob has the answer he needs, because he mentioned it earlier.
Only more challenges.
Excellent.
Tom Rhodes mentioned something at our meeting that really surprised me. He said there's been a 20% increase in residential development in Onondaga County in the last decade, at the same time that our population is flat as a pancake. So I was surprised it would be that much in that short period of time. Did that check out, Andy? Does that make sense?
I'd have to look at it. It sounds plausible to me. I guess we'd have to look at rate of growth, but yeah, I think depending on how you quantify it, that's a very plausible number.
And one of the questions is how local government structures may incentivize, that type of infrastructure development in a zero growth population economy, and are there tax sharing arrangements that can help solve some of those problems? I mean, those are kind of at the core of the issue, because we, as a community, our population hasn't grown, I think, the county since 1970, and in terms of population growth. And there has been a lot of development, obviously, in the county during those.
So does that speak to number of family units going up, but the size of the family units getting smaller, or?
No, I think what it really is, the theme that I think Tom is really focusing on is development should occur, if at all possible, where you have the existing infrastructure.
Yeah, the sprawl.
Yeah, the sprawl.
The sprawl. I think that county executive was
I
talking.
think he actually used the terminology infrastructure sprawl. So I think that was kind of where he was driving the thing.
Where you spread it out.
Like you, like
The
yeah,
challenge-
shit farther out here.
There's a lot of different challenges that creates. One of the challenges is that for many towns, right, residential development is in and of itself a form of development and revenue that is, you know, put yourself in the shoes of an elected official who feels an obligation to reduce the property tax burden for the 30, 40, however many thousand people who elect them. You can understand that decision-making process, right? And so part of the task, I think, is to understand the motivations for some of the decision-making that takes place and try to sort of back out from those motivations whether or not there are more rational ways to think about development in a micro scale within towns, within villages, county, city, in the context of the broader regional economy, right? So some of those larger decisions get made with a better line of sight to that broader context, because that broader context does impact all of us, whether we're at a small town, village level or at the broader county level. That's what we're gonna try to unpack a little bit.
I think one of his things that really surprised me was not only the cost, for example, of a pump station, and he gave the total number of pump stations that exist in the county, but what is the annual maintenance cost associated with pump stations? And it's incredible. And I think he was using some of these to kind of demonstrate that if we located more of our development, and he's not saying it should be in the city versus not in the towns or not in the villages, but even in the villages and the towns where we have the infrastructure, if we can better utilize that infrastructure, in the end, the cost of the service is going to be advantaged. So I thought it was a very good discussion.
And one of the core questions is how do the structures of local government impact those decisions?
Well, I think on being on the committee too, the question I raised is what is economic development? And like in my area, I see a lot of new homes being built. I see new roads going in, new sewer lines, new water lines that all are going to have to be maintained. Well, we're creating more infrastructure at a time that we're hearing that maintaining infrastructure is so expensive. And town of Cicero, it's economic development, but then we question where are the people coming from that are moving in there? If the entire county is not increasing the population, where are they coming from? So are we just shifting people around? Is this really what we're doing? And so for the county, maybe it's not economic development at all, maybe it's just a wash. So is it just shifting between the towns where economic development is coming from at the expense of another town? I mean, I think that's a question we have to answer.
It goes back to the question of motivation, right? So the extent to which some of those decisions are motivated by a need to generate revenue to support services, then we might address it one way. The extent to which they're motivated by, right, maintaining the integrity of the character of the town or the village, then I think that might require a slightly different set of approaches and responses. So I think the single biggest challenge is really getting at what those motivations are for some of the decisions that get made. And then we can, I think, sort of backtrack towards how we might reframe those decisions to candidly, to reflect the need for that sort of localized character and decision-making and community-based decision-making, while at the same time recognizing that those decisions do impact the broader context for our economic competitiveness, right? We've been trying to have that conversation for a decade now, and it's a hard one, right? But it's the right one to have.
Absolutely.
And I think, I'm going through one right now, and I think this is such a great committee, because we have a developer, and here's the approvals he's gonna need before he can start. FEMA, DEC, county DOT, state DOT, SOCPA, village planning, town engineer, and our engineer. I don't know how anybody can do that. I don't know how it can happen. I'm sitting there scratching my head saying,
Electrical permits,
why are
plumbing
you,
permits.
why are you doing
sewer.
this? Well, they see the value, but when you say local planning, 5 of those aren't in our control. At a local planning level, we're required to go to SOCPA, we're required to the FEMA, we're required DOT, we're required by state.
And that's good.
Those requirements, I think you gotta look at and say, how do we work at that? Because
Sure,
that
yeah,
affects, listen, we would love to say, great, you guys take it over, but as long as you keep the character and keep that in mind, we all benefit.
And you have to have all those things before you do what?
Before we can sign off and say, here's your permit to go ahead and build. I wouldn't do it, I would be like, see you later.
Which is one reason why people move away from New York State. I think all those requirements make it, I mean, people don't have a lot of time to wait. Honestly, it took us exactly 2 years to get permits in White Plains to build a shore. 2 years, with meetings every single month, and every month there was a different requirement. In New Jersey, we went to build a shore, within 3 months, everybody was bending backwards to make sure we got in there and gave us the permit. And that's the difference. And I think we need to look at the cost of doing business in New York State at every level, the requirements. That's a perfect example.
The
You don't need to
regional,
take that long. We need,
there's gotta be a better way.
So how do we take like some of this, you know, this morning on the news, and I guess the report was from the bookings about our standing nationally. From a growth perspective, from an employment perspective, it seems like that feeds a lot of the basis, economic development, you know, just when you read the report, it's astonishing. But I think that becomes a basis for, you know, a big part of our public discussion, really.
Yeah.
Because I see it weaving into every last one of our sub-teams. And, you know, and I heard the report this morning, I was just chatting with Ann about it, and, you know, we're dead last.
And if you think about
Are
why,
we dead last?
Dead last.
why we're all sitting
300
here,
metropolitan
it's because we want to change something. And
Yeah.
what is it that we want to change? And the number one issue 10 years ago when it was polled, and I can't imagine has changed, is economic development and job growth.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's not a silver bullet that if we change local government structures, it's going to change that. But, you know, what part of it does it play? And there's been a lot of progress with the local economic development, the non-governmental organizations, and even governmental organizations in the last 10 years, with the reorganization of the chamber and center state, with the regional councils, with the co-location of the county and the city economic development offices. But, you know, those leading indicators that you're talking about, you know, they haven't, you know, the needle hasn't moved on those yet. And how do you get that needle to move?
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I think one of the other issues too is that's not true all across New York State. I mean, if you look at New York City, New York City is, you know,
Unfortunately, all up and down the thruway, the municipalities were very, very low on this, in this report. We're all sort of clustered together, which does speak to some of the challenges of being in the state and some of the issues, certainly without the strength and the resources that downstate is enjoying, to try to, you know, overcome those headwinds.
The discussion's fantastic. Unfortunately, we gotta get to the next committee. Steve, I think you're gonna take the lead on governance.
Yes, with Donna. Is Donna on the phone, by the way?
I don't think so.
No, she, unfortunately, I got an email, Steve, at 11:45, something had come up.
Okay, all right, so I'll take it. So we are really only just getting started right now. We had our first teleconference a little over a week ago. Because both Don and I travel quite a bit, we spent a lot of our time just discussing the timeline, meeting frequency, and what success looks like for this committee. And on that last note, we really focused on two areas related to the output of the committee in the form of a white paper to support the study and the report to our governor. Focused on the obstacles to advancing change and innovation. I've just listed 3 that I've heard in the last 30 minutes. So I think there's going to be no shortage of obstacles that we'll be talking about. And then secondly is the options, the structural options for implementing change. And we're gonna look to some benchmarks and some examples that already exist in practice that we can incorporate so that there's at least some sense for directionally, you know, here are some of the municipalities, here are some of the cities that have actually implemented some things that have resulted in positive outcomes. And that's it. I think we're scheduled to meet in
3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay? So we have a lot of work to do. We need to get some meetings with a number of people who've gone through some both good and bad experiences. But, you know, just naming off some of the mandates, we started with government mandates on a 2% tax cap. I'm not familiar with this, but MS4 drainage issues, new mandate on audits before grants are delivered.
MS4 is everything that goes into your storm sewer has to be mapped where it goes and where it ends up.
Oh, of course it does.
And everything's got to be labeled
Okay.
and
then
tracked
finally-
every year in an annual report.
Okay.
Unfunded.
Anything else?
Oh, it's
I'm sure there's
yes.
a long list. You know, and then, you know, all the permits before building can actually go forward,
Things
so.
too, like Taylor law, Wicks law,
Yeah.
prevailing wage.
prevailing wage rate,
You know, the Medicaid
Binding
challenge is
arbitration.
another one that we talked about.
scaffolding and all that. Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to the next meeting, because I think we're gonna have some ideas for us for next week. Joe, would you want to talk about the process of developing white paper for the community consideration?
Sure, so just to overlay on all of the committee updates we just heard, our team right now is working on developing a white paper for each of the committees, but primarily focused on those that are that have services in their purview. So I'm thinking about public safety, infrastructure, because you're looking at highway, public works services, municipal operations. The white papers are intended to document at a high level, frankly at a concept level at this point, the range of potential alternatives. So what we want to do is begin as we make this pivot from information gathering to, you know, what are the alternatives to what we have today. We want to begin to put some parameters around that discussion, to frame that discussion about based on what the range of alternatives is. So you can envision, for example, in the case of the Public Safety Committee, the white paper on fire options will look at one side of the continuum, what are examples of delivering that service at a very local level. In other words, where you know, every jurisdiction has its own police department, its own fire department. Maybe the collaboration is only mutual aid. At the other end of the continuum, what are the truly regional options? You know, we look at some of the communities down the eastern seaboard, right? What are the pluses and minuses to delivering that service at a regional level? And then what are the gradations in between, the major gradations in between the extremes of that continuum? And again, the intent here is not to drive any of the committees or away from one or the other alternatives, but just to begin to inform the discussions that are taking place at the committee level as to the range of potential alternatives. And if, you know, past is prologue, you know, previous projects suggest where this project will go, I can almost guarantee that the committee conversations won't focus on, you know, option B makes a lot of sense here, and option D makes a ton of sense there, but really it's going to be, you know, we like some of the advantages presented by option B, but option C is really nice. How can we create a hybrid? What might work here? And that'll also give our team and the individual committees the opportunity to go back out, benchmark against other communities, and identify outside experts that can come and participate in each of the committee meetings by teleconference or something like that. So again, really these white papers are just intended to help frame that conversation about options that we'll begin to move to in each of the committees over the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. Those white papers will probably be pulled together over the next couple of weeks, and in the next 1 or 2 meetings of each committee, we'll have an opportunity to go through those.
Excellent. Any questions of Joe as far as that process? Well, we said that we wouldn't make this meeting go beyond an hour and a half, and I think we are probably there. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to joining you again probably a month. Next meeting is February 27th.